What's going on, guys? I have finally finished all of the welding. It took forever, I kept finding more and more, but finally it is finished. And structurally wise, we've now got a rust-free car. So we can move on to some nice mechanical work. So in today's video, we're going to be concentrating on the front suspension. We're going to be stripping it down to bits, we're going to be inspecting for play and wheel bearings, ball joints, track rod ends, things like that. And then we're going to be cleaning it and hopefully taking it from something that looks like this to something that will end up looking like this. And one final thing for those guys that watch all the way to the end of our videos, I'm giving away some free stuff. And it's free stuff for a Mk1 MR2. Anyway guys, massive long intro, do apologise. Let's jump into it, let's get it stripped down, let's go and take a look. Let's look at what can give us play in our front suspension area. We've got the track rod end there. We've also got a ball joint underneath, which we'll go into in more depth when we get it stripped down. And we've also got a wheel bearing there. Now then, you will do this with the wheel on. So let's just quickly pop the wheel back on. Now the first thing we're going to do is check that the wheel turns nice and easily. This one does, despite the fact we've got very rusty discs. Now, we're going to look for play. Now, side to side, it's okay. That's obviously just the steering rack moving, but there's no clunky, there's no movement. That's fine, top and bottom. That's also fine. Now if we did have movement in, say, the top and bottom plane, as opposed to the side and side, the top and bottom would be pivoting on that bottom ball joint. So that would lead us to look at that bottom ball joint for play. If we only had it side to side and not top and bottom, it would lead us to think we had play in our track rod end, because the play would be there when we're pushing against that track rod end, and it wouldn't be there when we're on our ball joint. However, if we've got play left and right and top and bottom, that would point to our wheel bearing. And if we pop over to the bench, we'll see just how bad the driver's side wheel bearing was. Right then. Now imagine you've got a wheel on here, so you've got a lot more leverage. But even without, I can still rock that from side to side. And with the wheel on, it's even more exaggerated in every single plane across here, which is why this wheel bearing was toast. Now then, the first thing we're going to remove is our track rod end. It's got a split pin in it, so we're going to pull the split pin round and remove it. And we're then going to undo the 17mm nut on the end, but we're not going to take it off completely. Unwind the nut until it's nearly off, probably on a couple of threads, and we're then going to strike it with a hammer, which is going to release the ball joint on the end from the taper. We can then remove the nut and then extract that and move it to one side. That will then give us a little bit of movement on the hub, which will then in turn give us better access for getting to the few other bolts that we need to. But before we start that, we're going to get some WD-40 and we're going to spray the two 17s at the top, the two 14s that hold the ball joint onto the bottom of the hub, and then the two big 17s that hold the caliper carrier onto the hub as well. That will now give us a little bit more room to give us access to these two 17s. So what we're going to do is we're going to undo these two. So Let's get that light out of the way for you. Out of your way and completely into my way. Now then, hold it with a 17mm spanner and then undo with a breaker bar with a 17 on the end, probably an extension on the bottom for access. And also you've got this little camber locating cam, if you will. Make a note of the orientation of it. This little lug is perfectly flat facing outwards, but it could be here, it could be here. We'll talk more about that in a second. The next thing we're going to do is get a 14 on this one here. And if we spin you around, we are going to be on this one here. Hopefully, should be a pleasure to undo. You might want to pop your steering back in for this one, just to hold you a little bit still. The next thing we want to do is grab our 12mm and remove our 2 caliper retainer bolts. Bear in mind, this one is a lot longer than this one because the caliper is thicker. There we go. Whilst we're in the local vicinity, we're going to put a little bit of WD-40 on our nipple, the one on the car, and we're going to get a very small 8mm spanner on the nipple, and we're just going to ease it forwards and backwards to check that we can crack it off so that then we can replace our brake fluid. And also we need to remove these 2 clips. We can now remove that one and our 2 caliper bolts, and then simply remove the caliper. So that's now off. Happy days. And luckily, because we've got pretty much brand new green stuff pads and pretty much brand new discs, the piston is all the way back, which is a good thing. So it means it's not seized out. So as long as our brakes work, we should be in a good place with that one. So now we're going to grab ourselves a cable tie. So there we go. We're not stressing the line at all, which again, looks pretty good to be fair. So now we've got lovely access for our 2 17mm caliper carrier bolts. But before that, we're going to remove our pads, which should, after we've taken these little clips out, should just ease their way out. And then we can remove our carrier. And these little clips in here, we will remove those later on before we go into our painting and treating process. So the next thing to remove is our brake disc. That didn't go too badly, did it? Sweet! So now all we have left to do is our 2 17s, remember that camber cam, our 2 14s in the bottom, and our hub should just extract off the job after I've put another glove on. Happy days. So there we have it. Our lower ball joint which is relatively free moving, our track rod end, which again is nice and free, and then we've got a top mount on our strut, which is nice and free. So let's go over to the bench and have a little look what that hub consists of. Right, so there it is, all removed and off on the bench, and as you can see, 12 years outside has really taken its toll. But the main hub itself is intact, the wheel bearing's good, the steering track rod is good, and so's the lower ball joint, which is still on the car, so that's my main concern. There should be a little kind of air channeling part here, but that is far, far gone. So we're going to have to lose that bit, because to get it off we need to undo these 3 10mm Torx, and if I ended up stripping or shearing those off, I'm going to be in a really, really bad place. So what we're going to do is we're probably going to modify and cut the shield back so that it's good but rusty metal, and we're then going to rub it down and we're going to treat it. We're going to do the same with the disc. If you have a little look at the back of the disc, if you rub it down a little bit, it says minimum thickness. I know this because I've done the other one. Minimum thickness 21mm. Grab yourself a vernier caliper. We're at 22.2. So we know the discs are within spec and they'll go again. We'll wire brush all of the faces, and the bell itself, we'll then treat that and then we'll paint it. We'll do the same with the caliper carrier. We will take a couple of reference pictures first, and then we will get ourselves a little screwdriver and we will start to remove these 4 clips, because they all come out nice and easy. We'll then store them, and then that gives us the ability to rub down, strip and paint the caliper carrier. So we'll get all that done, then we'll move on over to the car. And we'll do the same to the suspension arms. Wire brush them, rub them down, blow them through, degrease them, and then we'll treat them. And then we can move on to some painting. Right, one quick thing before we get into all the rubbing down and treating and cleaning. Let's remove this little camber cam. Remember the orientation of it. Just get yourself a hammer and a socket, something smaller obviously, like so. It should fucking size of it! F off! You're massive! F off! F off! F me, that's massive! F off! No, that's fucking f off! That's fucking huge! Ah! Scared of a little spider, are you? Right, that's all the painting done. Now whilst it's drying, I'll talk you through a few quick things. First of all, the paint we've used. We've gone for a high temperature engine enamel in satin black. I've gone for that because it's capable of handling the potential heat that the brakes are going to produce. It's satin black so you can tell when it's dry, and it paints really nicely. It's a one coat application. You can paint it nice and thick with any old crappy brush, and it will always level out and come out nicely. Now what we're going to do next is we're going to reassemble the front hub, caliper, carrier, things like that in the reverse order that we removed it, and then we'll pick the job back up just as we're about to fit the brakes, and I'll take you through the procedure we're going to use on that. Right then, before the hub goes back on the car, let's quickly focus on this camber cam. The three main things that you need to concern yourself with is the original witness mark, which gives you an idea of where the original one was. The fact that the hole going through the middle of it is offset, we'll talk about that more when it's on the car. And also that the bore is nice and clean, and a little bit of copper slip on there, and that now moves nicely. And what we'll do is we'll put it back round so that it's exactly where it was, and when we tighten it up we'll leave it in that position, and when it goes back on the car I'll show you why that offset hole is so important. Right, that's on the job now, and this is where that offset hole in that cam is the really clever bit, because as we turn it, the hub goes in and out, and also that affects the orientation and in turn the camber. See that moving? So you can now see how getting that in the wrong place can affect your camber by a couple of degrees, which is huge. So if you're changing to a new hub, reference the old one that you remove, and if you're in doubt, when it's all buttoned up and put back together, go and get your forward alignment checked. But the fact that you've taken it apart and cleaned it and copper greased it, it means that the boys at the forward alignment shop are going to have no problems at all undoing these two bolts, and no problems at all adjusting that to set your camber perfectly. Right, it is time to refit our brakes. Now the first thing we're going to do is give them a good old degrease. Now then, before the carrier goes on, the disc needs to go on. Now I've copper slipped our threads for our wheel nuts, and also our hub, and also the little spigot that the disc sits onto. Now we haven't connected the steering just yet, so that gives us the ability to turn our hub around. Grab our two 17mm bolts, add a little bit of copper slip, we've put our little retainer clips back in for the pads, and then that one can sit in behind there. The next thing to do is to refit our pads. Now, these have got plenty of meat left on them, so we'll give them a little bit of a clean and a degrease. We'll then apply some copper slip to them and sit them in with our retaining clips. The next thing to do is to add some copper slip to the back of our pads. Now, the way the caliper sits on, you're going to have the piston here, and then you're going to have the two fingers on the other side that are going to sit here. So we'll put copper slip just here and here, and then we'll put a little bit round here for where the piston makes contact with the pad. The last thing to do is to refit your steering. That'll pop nicely in there onto the taper. We can then stick the castellated nut on the bottom, and we can do it up with the gun to pull the taper into the hub, and then we can wind it round manually by hand to the point that we line the holes up with the castellated nut and the ball joint, put a split pin through, and then we're done. The last thing to do to finish the job off nicely is to paint that caliper. Now I'm going to paint it on the job. I could have painted it off the job, but that would have mean disturbing fluid lines and things like that, and with it cabled up to the strut at the top it is a bit awkward. So back on the car now, I'm going to get that engine enamel back out and a very small artist brush and very slowly and painfully paint that caliper. But I'm not going to show you the footage of that, guys, because I'm very aware that this video is long enough already. But I'll show you a picture when it's finished. Then we can talk about the welding. There you go. Painted, put back together, reassembled, refreshed, and ready for an MOT, hopefully. Now the next logical thing to do would be to replace all of the brake fluid and the clutch fluid, because the car has been off the road for 12 years. But due to the sheer length of this video, we'll do it in another video. And also, I've got a new toy to use which should make changing your brake and clutch fluid an absolute dream. So let's move on, let's look at the welding that we've done, and if you're still here and you're still watching, you deserve a medal or some free parts. Free parts. 2-3 minutes time we'll be outroing free parts while we're staying tuned. See you in a minute. Right, let's whip through this as quick as possible. There was a small amount of corrosion here, here and here, and I kept cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting until I found good metal. I then had to let these 5 patches in. 5 patches because curvature there, curvature here, curvature through here. So to make one patch would have been practically impossible. So it's been done in sections, seam welded in, primed, and then painted to protect it. Now let's move on to what that meets underneath the floor. It was very corroded underneath the floor, up round and into the chassis leg, and also this return lip was completely rotten. So it's been cut off, refabricated, welded on, and then you've got it seam sealed, primed, spray sealed, etc. Let's move underneath to see what else is new under there. Right, underneath, all of this is completely brand new. That was our section that we welded into our floor, which then needed to tie into this, which was completely rotten. So it was a section, a section, a section, all seam welded all the way through, which went up to here. And I said to myself, if that corrosion goes into that anti-roll bar, I'm throwing it in the bin. I'm not continuing with this job. Guess what? It did. I then said, if that corrosion goes underneath that strut brace, I'm throwing it in the bin. Guess what? It did. But you just got to keep cutting until you find good metal. I did. I then refabricated anti-roll bar mounts underneath strut brace, which has all been removed for treating and spray sealing, etc, etc. So we are completely brand new metal all the way down and through here to the corner. So this section is now solid. Let's move on to the other sill. Right, let's start at the front of the sill. There was a small bit of surface corrosion there, which when I cut it back to good metal, the inner stiffener was solid and the outer needed a patch that size, which has been primed inside, primed outside, seam weld, seam sealed, and then stone chipped. Now, at the back, I was so confident with that little tiny patch, remember it, that was just welded on? Yes, it was welded on top of absolute rot. So I cut this small section out, and I then found out the inner stiffener was rotten. So then I had to keep cutting all the way back to here to open up a bigger hole to repair the stiffener. Then I made an outer sill, which I plug welded along the bottom, seam welded along the top, primed inside, primed outside. Yes, that's correct. Seam sealed, and then stone chipped. And these two little black bits are spray wax, because I've cavity waxed the whole vehicle, but we'll go into that in another episode. Also, there has been spray sealing underneath the vehicle, and there's also been one patch which has had to be let in alongside a couple of Suspect, but very solid repairs that were done many years ago. And finally, inside the car, there were lots of patches of kind of surface rust, and that was due to the fact that the carpets have been so wet inside for so long because the car was uncovered and, you know, that sort of stuff. So that has all been rubbed down, treated, so that it's neutralised, and then it's all been painted. So that's all done, and we've now, from an MOT point of view, got a rust-free car. So there we have it, guys. Welding is complete, and you've seen what else has had to go on. In another episode, we're going to go on to the cavity waxing on the car. But from an MOT standpoint, on the front of the vehicle, suspension and brakes are done, which puts us in a much better position. I think moving forward next, I'm going to be working on the back end of the car, and then we're going to be looking at our coolant leak, which may be a water pump, and if it is a water pump, that's going to be water pump, and if you're in that area, we might as well do a cam belt. So there we go, it's all moving on, it's all good. A couple of quick things, if you've made it to the end of this video, thank you very much for watching. It is currently Tuesday the 4th, and tomorrow, Wednesday the 5th, we are off to Paris to Retromobile, which is a huge indoor classic car show with over 1,000 vehicles, I believe. So we're going to be documenting all of that and hopefully getting a video out to you within the next week. So there should be some very, very cool cars to watch out for on that. And also, I said we were going to do a giveaway, so we are. Front brake pads. Now, before I even looked at the front brakes on this one, I bought myself a brand new set of Pagid, or Pagid, however you say it, brake pads for the front of the car. I don't need them. I don't want to send them back because I can't be bothered. So if any of you guys want some free brake pads for a Mk1 MR2 for your car, drop me a message in the comments section or send me an email, resto_nation@icloud.com, and if you cover the postage, you can have them. Thank you very much for watching all the way to the end. You're an absolute hero, and if you want some free brake pads, drop me a comment, drop me an email. This video's got so long, I've got to the stage of repeating myself. Like, subscribe, share, enjoy. See you soon. Retromobile, Paris, cavity waxing, brake fluid, clutch fluid change. It's all going on. We're getting very, very close. We really are. Yes. See you soon.